Yeah. So tell us your Tommy Spaulding, is that the story?
Yes. This is a story about a young guy who went through high school not very brilliantly, but very determinedly. He had a learning deficiency that he wasn't aware of. He just knew that no matter how hard he studied, he never was going to be top of the class. However, he did graduate from high school, and then he had to start looking for a university, and none of the top universities that he really wanted to go to were going to accept somebody with marks like his. So he ended up with one of the lower ranked universities. He got his degree, and then he couldn't find a job. He ended up over in Japan teaching second language to Japanese students, teaching the English language, as a matter of fact, to Japanese students. And one day he got an email from a friend of his who said, "Oh, Tommy, there's a great opportunity for you back here in Washington. The Rotarians International are looking for a person to be their ambassador around the world, and you'd be just the perfect person for that." Tommy filled out his application talking about all of the things that he had done that he believed showed his leadership abilities, and he sent it off to Rotarians International. He was one of the 10 people who were chosen to come to Washington to do an interview. Now, Tommy didn't have much money, so he took the last of his bank account, cleaned it right out, and flew from Japan back to Washington for that interview. He walked into the bar/lounge where the interviews were being held, and he looked at the other 9 contestants in the room, and they were all busily working on their laptops or texting their somebody, and they had their Ivy League sweatshirts on, Harvard, Yale, Princeton. He didn't have a computer, he didn't have a cell phone, and he didn't have a sweatshirt from one of those Ivy League universities. So he went up and talked to the bartender, and he found out that the bartender owned that business, and his father had owned it before him, and probably his little son that was playing on the floor was going to own it after he was through. Eventually, Tommy was called for his interview. He went into the panel of people and he laid bare his soul, all the things he had done and how much he would love to take on that position. But when he left, he still didn't have any idea how well he had done. So he got into his rental car and he drove to New Jersey to see his parents. And at the end of the weekend, he really hadn't heard from anybody, and he had to make up his mind what to do. He couldn't afford to hang around in the United States if he hadn't got the position, and he had to find enough money to get back to Japan. So his father took it upon himself to find somebody that Tommy could call that might tell them how he made out. It just happened that he called the right person, who said, "Tommy Spaulding, I was going to give you a call. You know, after you left, we argued who we should have for our ambassador for hours, and it eventually came down to 2 people, a young woman from Harvard and you. But no matter how hard we tried, we couldn't get beyond our stalemate. Which one of you is going to take the job?" So finally the chairman called for a break, and we went out into the lounge area to just sort of relax for a few minutes. And the chairman saw the bartender there, and he said, "Hey, you must have seen all of those 10 people. You've got to have a pretty good idea of what they're made of. Who would you suggest?" And the barkeep said, "Well, actually, I only talked to one of them. But that Tommy Spaulding is a really smart young guy. If I were you, I'd choose him." And we did, and you have the job. Now, I love that story because the guy had not gone up to talk with the barkeep with any thought that this was going to actually help his cause. He just did it because he was an outgoing guy and he was passing the time. And I think that just reminds us of how important connections are, how important it is that we take the risk and stick out our hand and say hello to people we don't know. You never know who you meet who's going to be able to help you somewhere along the way. It was one of my favorite stories.
That is a great one.
That's a good